Arab leaders urge ceasefire to end Gaza, madness. US says it would allow Hamas to regroup, SBS News. Arab leaders urge ceasefire to end Gaza, madness. US says it would allow Hamas to regroup. Palestinians have reported a deadly Israeli airstrike on a United Nations-run school in northern Gaza, serving as a shelter as US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met regional Arab leaders to discuss how to contain the conflict. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, right, with Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry, left, and Jordanian Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi. Source: Jonathan Ernst. Key points. Arab leaders have pressed Antony Blinken for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Blinken pushed back, saying a ceasefire would only let Hamas militants regroup. Palestinian witnesses said Israel struck Al-Faqora school in Jabalia, with reports saying at least 15 were killed. Arab leaders publicly pressed US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Saturday to secure an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, hours after Palestinians said an Israeli airstrike killed at least 15 people in a UN-run school being used as a shelter. In a rare open display of disagreement, the top US diplomat pushed back as he stood next to his Jordanian and Egyptian counterparts at a press conference, saying a ceasefire would only let Hamas militants regroup. Israel has bombarded Gaza since, according to the Israeli government, and over 200 hostages taken. More than 9,488 people have been killed in Gaza since the 7th of October, according to the health ministry in Hamas-controlled Gaza. Read more. Hezbollah leader tells US to halt Israel's Gaza attack to prevent a regional war. Blinken met the Saudi, Qatari, Emirati, Egyptian and Jordanian foreign ministers in Amman. Right now we have to make sure that this war stops, Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi told the press conference afterwards. We need to work together to stop this madness. Blinken said all were agreed on the need for peace and that the current status quo in Gaza could not hold, but he acknowledged there were differences between Washington and its allies. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a brief history. Friends or foes? Where Israel's Middle Eastern neighbors stand on its war against Hamas. As war rages in Gaza, why is the West Bank in its deadliest week of violence? Relief and fear. Evacuated Australians speak after Gaza border crossing breakthrough. Washington has maintained its robust support for Israel but has also begun advocating for temporary humanitarian pauses to allow aid into Gaza. On Friday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rebuffed a pause proposal from Blinken after a day of meetings. Read more. Gaza's children are being killed at an unimaginable rate. Those who survive face a grim future. More than 60 hostages abducted during the 7th of October attacks in southern Israel were missing because of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, the armed wing of Palestinian militant faction Hamas said, adding that the bodies of 23 hostages were trapped under rubble. Reuters could not immediately verify the statement, which has gained power in the Gaza Strip since winning legislative elections there in 2006. Its stated aim is to establish a Palestinian state, while refusing to recognize Israel's right to exist. One strike hit the schoolyard. Palestinian witnesses said Israel struck Al-Faqora school in Jabalia, where thousands of evacuees were living, on Saturday morning. The Israeli military said a preliminary inquiry suggested it had not targeted the location, but the explosion may have been a result of IDF fire aimed at another target. The circumstances were under review, it added. Reuters footage of the aftermath showed broken furniture and other belongings lying on the ground, patches of blood on the ground and on food, and people crying. I was standing here when 3 bombings happened. I carried a body and another decapitated body with my own hands, a young boy said in video obtained by Reuters, crying in despair. God will take my vengeance. Nearby, a resident comforted a woman in shock. Juliette Thoma, Director of Communications for the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, confirmed the UN-run school, which is in the Gaza City area, had been hit. At least one strike hit the schoolyard where there were tents for displaced families. Another strike hit inside the school where women were baking bread, Thomas said by phone. The Ministry of Health in Gaza said another Israeli missile strike killed 2 women at the door of the Nasser Children's Hospital. Several more people were injured, it said. There was no immediate Israeli response to that report. Widespread anger in Israel. On Saturday, police held back protesters demonstrating outside the residence of Netanyahu, amid widespread anger in Israel over the failures that led to the Hamas attacks last month. The protest coincided with a poll showing more than 3/4 of Israelis believe Netanyahu should resign, including Gaza City, and head to the southern part of the enclave. The military said it would enable Palestinians to travel on a main Gaza highway, the Salah ad-Din Road, during a 3-hour window on Saturday afternoon. If you care about yourself and your loved ones, heed our instruction to head south, it said in a social media post in Arabic. Read more. Israel told civilians in Gaza to move south for their safety. Why is it still striking there? Israel has imposed a full blockade on Gaza and allowed very little aid in from Egypt, saying it fears it would be stolen by Hamas. Satterfield said there were no recorded instances of Hamas seizing aid. In what appeared to presage a widening of Israel's ground offensive, the military issued footage showing armored bulldozers churning up northern Gaza areas in what it described as creating access routes for forces. A combined tank and combat engineering unit carried out a pinpoint raid in the southern Gaza Strip to map out buildings and neutralize explosives, it said. Lebanon's Hezbollah said it carried out simultaneous attacks on Israeli positions at the Lebanese border on Saturday, as residents of South Lebanon reported some of the fiercest Israeli strikes yet during weeks across border clashes. After Israeli forces invaded southern Lebanon that year, it is backed by Iran and leads a multi-party alliance that holds just under half the seats in Lebanon's parliament. Hezbollah is listed as a terrorist organization by countries including Australia, the US, Germany and the UK. The European Union lists only its military wing as a terrorist organization. Share this with family and friends. Recommended for you. Hezbollah leader tells US to halt Israel's Gaza attack to prevent a regional war. World. Australia is in a domestic violence crisis. Experts say we need a whole of society change. Australia. The deeply problematic methods some councils use to deter homeless people. Australia. Donald Trump's sons have testified at his fraud trial. Here's what they said. World. Who are Yemen's Houthis and why did they attack Israel? World. Relief and fear. Evacuated Australians speak after Gaza border crossing breakthrough. Australia. An earthquake in Nepal has killed at least 150 people. Here's what we know so far. World. Gaza officials. Israeli strikes on refugee camp killed 195, as UN flags possible war crimes. Middle East. Topics. SBS World News. Explore SBS. SBS Home. SBS On Demand. News. Audio. Languages. What's on? TV and radio guide. Food. Indigenous. Sport. Voices. Teaching resources. Languages. Arabic. Phu Tong Hua, Mandarin. Guang Dong Hua, Cantonese. Tieng Viet, Vietnamese. Hangujeo, Korean. See all languages. Contact SBS. 1-800-500-727, toll free. Help Centre. Locked Bag 028, Crow's Nest, New South Wales 1585. Follow SBS. Facebook. YouTube. Instagram. Twitter. LinkedIn. Copyright. Terms and conditions. Privacy. Your online preferences. Sales and advertising. Complaints. SBS Code of Practice. Careers. About Us. SBS acknowledges the traditional custodians of country and their connections and continuous care for the skies, lands and waterways throughout Australia.